Welcome, everyone. What an exciting talk with the CEO of Colossal Biosciences, Ben Lamm. Ben, I'm super excited to talk. I want to get out ahead right now and answer the question that I think is on everyone's mind. Haven't you seen the end of Jurassic Park?
Yeah, I wore an InGen shirt for you. I knew this was going to come up. I didn't think you were going to lead with it. Yeah, so Jurassic Park, which you probably are familiar with, was a movie. It had a great plot. It had a great ending, but like Blade Runner and many other movies, it was just a movie, right? And I don't think they were as focused on conservation as we are. But there were a lot of really great things that came from it, right? Like we now know, and like moms in Iowa now know that there's this thing called DNA, and humans can actually edit it. So I think there's a lot of good that came from Jurassic Park.
Okay, but seriously though, when are we getting dinosaurs?
You said you'd only ask one. And I only brought one T-shirt. There is no dino DNA. Actually, Beth Shapiro, our chief science officer, who you know, went on a huge Fortune conference, said that, and she was like, started being called like negative Nancy-saurus and all of this stuff on Reddit. Like Reddit hates Beth Shapiro. It's amazing, and because she told them that there is no dino DNA, we can't bring back dinosaurs. You know, they died off 65 million years ago, and the most ancient DNA we work with is about 1.2 million years old.
Okay. But we're going to get into this in a little bit when we get into the actual science of what's going on in the labs. But there are connectors, there are bridges to dinosaur DNA.
There could be bridges to dinosaur DNA.
Okay.
You're already scaring me.
Okay. I want to talk about ethics because I think that, you know, anyone who would have an issue with what's going on, there's this question of ethics. There's a question that Jurassic Park brought up, which is, if we can do it, should we?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, we try to spend a lot of time developing technologies for de-extinction that have some application to human healthcare, which we're monetizing, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and then for conservation. So all the tech that we make has an application to conservation. We give it to the world for free. We just open source it. If that wasn't enough, we then started a foundation and raised a bunch of money to help with species preservation. And you know, I think that it's all about choice, right? We talk about ethics, but the reality is modern conservation isn't working at the speed at which we're eradicating species. Right. And we're going to need a de-extinction toolkit. We're going to lose up to 50% of all biodiversity between now and 2050. And the choice not to pursue de-extinction is a choice. And we know that the results of that choice are half of life on Earth is dead. So I think that we have a moral obligation and an ethical obligation to pursue technologies to at least undo some of the sins of the past that we have done.
Right. Well, this gets into the bigger conversation about why de-extinction. Why is that important?
Yeah, so right now, you know, if you look at ecosystem collapse, if you look at kind of like the relationship that we are now finding that nature, I think that humans always thought existed, but we're now starting to understand that there's this relationship between nature and humans and our ability to thrive within that environment, like food security, water security, climate, carbon sequestration. A non-balanced ecosystem, like when we eradicate things like wolves from Yellowstone, you know a lot about wolves, you've worked with wolves, you love wolves, we've had way too many private conversations about wolves, but like with wolves, they've seen that, you know, we thought in 1925 was a great idea because, you know, people had read, you know, Little Red Riding Hood, they had seen all these things, and so like, we should just kill all the wolves. Well, Yellowstone like plummeted, like all the biodiversity, all the flora and fauna started plummeting. You know, once we reintroduced wolves back in 1995, within 5 years, the entire park, you know, bloomed. They saw species of both plants and animals they hadn't seen in nearly 100 years. And so we have to understand that the things that we are doing to this planet are changing, especially with eradicating species, have this like tropic downgrading effect, and it's going to completely screw us in so many different ways.
We're talking about cleaning up the ills of man. People call Colossal the modern day Jurassic Park, or the real life Jurassic Park, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Below the water's surface, it's about genetic advancement.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about cleaning up the mistakes that man has made, whether that's by the extinction of a species or solving the world's plastic issues.
Yeah, we actually, I would argue that Colossal is the most advanced genetic engineering company on the planet, at least from a synthetic biology perspective, to be able to engineer genomes and to deliver multiplex editing, so editing a lot of things at the same time with 100% efficiency, getting the intended consequences we want from that. We're doing things that no one else has seen. And you mentioned the plastics. We launched a company last year called Breaking, where we took this little microbe, this incredible scientist who Kanye found, right? It's this little microbe from the Amazon, like sounds right out of a movie. And they started feeding it different plastics, and it took stuff that like won't break down in 800 years, and they got it down to 2 years. But with synthetic biology, we can get it down to 2 days.
2 days? Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to go back to Colossal's origin story.
Yeah.
It started with $50 million of private equity?
Yeah, so, we actually raised 8.
Okay.
So I met George Church. George said we need about $6 million. I was like, oh.
And for people who don't know, who is George Church?
So George is arguably the father of synthetic biology. You should look him up. He's your height, which,
normal height.
It's not normal height. You're not normal height. So, I'm so tired of you saying that. You're not normal height. I think statistically, I am slightly above average. So, I will say that you and George.
I am not genetically modified. I will say that.
You're freaks of nature, and so you and George, of some version of normalcy, is the father of synthetic biology. A lot of the read-write genetic engineering tools that we have today, George actually made and actually invented and came out of his lab. So he is probably the smartest person on the planet. I mean, you've met him.
If you, I've met George. Yes, yeah. I'm one of the few people that.
Yeah. He's now like very. He's super Howard Hughesy now. So.
If you want to have your mind blown, go check out a video about where George is discussing how to implant the entire history of mankind into DNA.
Right, into his own DNA too.
But the fact that the DNA storage.
Yeah, DNA storage vehicle is pretty interesting. Like George and I spent a lot of time talking about this.
Right. Well, I picture like the monolith from 2001.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I think George's perspective is that most data is stored in ones and zeros, and if you look at DNA, you have 4 letters, so you can have more complex, relation to data, and you have vessels to store it. Like we could literally put data in a cell. If you're want to write a bad spy movie, you could like inject that cell into you, and you could go across the world, and someone could extract it and get that DNA.
Okay. All right. Back to Colossal. I digress.
Not that we're doing that.
So back to the origin. So you're inspired by George Church.
Yeah.
You feel like you kind of picked up where he left off.
This was his vision, and when you get time with someone like George, I try to maximize it. I wanted to build a synthetic biology software company, right? Because it's most of my background. I don't have a background in biology. And I started talking to him. I got his feedback on that in about 7 minutes. And I'm curious. So I'm like, what else you got? And he started talking about like regenerative neurons. He started talking about DNA storage. He started talking about living forever, just all kinds of stuff. And then I was like, George, this is insane. If you had one project with unlimited capital, what would it be? He didn't skip a beat. He's like, I'd worked to bring back the woolly mammoth. I'd reintroduced it back into the tundra to save the world from permafrost. I'd build technologies for humans and save other species. And then the call was over. Like that was like, I was smart enough to ask that question at the very end, and didn't sleep that night. And a week later, I was in his lab, and I was like, okay, I guess we're gonna go try to do this. So, but this is his #1 passion.
But there was a bit of providence for you. You came away from that conversation and something kind of mystical happened to you, right?
Yeah, because I felt like as a tech entrepreneur, I'm guilty, and many of us probably are guilty of saying, oh, I want to do this to make an impact or change the world. But most of those companies go out of business or get bought, and then whoever buys them, like Accenture, ruins them. And factual statements. And so when those types of things happen, as an entrepreneur, you then just kind of go rinse and repeat, right? Like we're pretty good at having thick skin and getting the shit beat out of us over and over again. And so, but I felt like with George, George had given us this platform and said, if you guys go pursue Colossal and it works, you'll make a true impact on the world. You'll create real value, and you can inspire the next generation. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, okay, this is kind of our shot to go try to do this. So I pulled together a couple of folks. It's like, if we don't go do this, we could probably never say we really want to go change the world again. We can just say, oh, we want to go build software shit. So
right. Any wins with the capital so far?
I mean, yeah, I think the woolly mouse is a big win.
Okay.
Right?
Does everyone know about the woolly mouse? No. Okay. Well, the people that don't know, there's going to be more people clapping. Did anyone see Saturday Night Live last night? The woolly mouse was on Saturday Night Live. And if you don't know what the woolly mouse is,
it was not a paid endorsement.
This is not a paid endorsement. No, Colin Jost was talking about the woolly mouse. And we have a video. Should we run the video?
Let's run the video.
Let's.
And the video is made by one of our good friends.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mike Doherty, who directed Godzilla King of the Monsters.
And the woolly mouse video.
So, yeah, from Godzilla to the woolly mouse video.
Hollywood's in a lot of transformation right now.
Let's learn about the woolly mouse.
In the beginning, before the dawn of man, there roamed a woolly mammoth. Hold it, that's not a mammoth, it's a woolly mouse. Wait, what the heck is that?
That is our colossal woolly mouse, with as many as 7 genes edited, all creating phenotypes that are reminiscent of a mammoth.
Interesting, but what of the science?
Making a mammoth is hard. One of the hardest things is to figure out what changes you have to make in the elephant genome to make it more mammoth-like.
What do you mean?
Well, we can't really experiment on mammoths, but we can test our hypotheses about which genes we'll want to change without having to bother any elephants.
0.75 ounces of pure cuteness.
The colossal woolly mouse has long, curly, wavy hair that is gold. Because we know that mammoth hair was gold, we can see them in the permafrost deposits.
Spectacular fur.
They also have a mutation that should make them better able to withstand cold climates by impacting their fat metabolism. And that is our colossal woolly mouse.
Incredible. More like holy sh.
Mike's the best.
The woolly mouse. So people, I think, would think that this is a new idea, that genetic modification is some sort of this brand new idea, and it would be exciting if that was the case, but we live in a genetically modified world already.
Yeah, you've seen pugs. So.
Pugs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been doing genetic modification for a long time. We've just been massively inefficient at it, right? Like we've been crossbreeding things, we've been testing things, and now we can actually use computers and synthetic biology to actually be very efficient at things, and we can rapidly accelerate all kinds of evolution.
Okay, so we talked earlier. I apologize, but we talked earlier about possible bridges to bringing dinosaurs back. The woolly mouse is the bridge to the mammoth.
Yeah, it is. And what people don't realize, besides, according to Mike, it's spectacular fur, is the fact that we really achieved 2 things with the mouse. Number one is that over the last 2.5 years, we've been editing Asian elephant cells with mammoth genes, and we think that it's going to work. And the only way we can do it is you make a mammoth. That's choice A, which seems like a big risk unless you're sure. Choice B is you can grow organoids using stem cells, which is super creepy. Which Mike does want to make a video of this. We're probably not going to let him. It's where we've actually grown hair in petri dishes. It's really weird, but it's not an end-to-end animal. It is a living cell. But it's not an end animal. And then the mouse, right? And so what's great about it is the project did 2 things. It showed us that initially that our edits that we are making for the mammoth are the right edits because we made them in the mouse, number one. And number 2, that end-to-end process, we just took the whole process, applied it to mice. We did it in September, and in October we had mice. And so it works. It also shows that all the mice that were born were healthy, so our screening works. And 100% of our edits with 1 edit delivery in a multiplex fashion worked with no off-target effects, which is nearly unheard of in genome engineering. So kind of proved the end-to-end process, also validated our mammoth work. And then it's like massively cute.
It is, yes, very cute. That
adorability was not something that we planned for.
Well, and I visited the lab. And I actually had the opportunity to puncture an Asian elephant egg and then implant it with woolly mammoth DNA.
Yeah. And you also had robotics and lasers assisting.
Of course.
But you were quite good, yeah.
Thank you. But I want to get into, there are 2 other animals that have been announced, the dodo and the thylacine. The thylacine was fascinating to me because there was not a complete genetic structure for the thylacine. But there are animals on the planet that are descendants of the thylacine that could then be kind of reverse engineered?
Yeah, so kind of like the woolly mouse, we have this thing called the fat-tailed Dunart, which you'll see next time you come to the lab, which is basically the equivalent of a little carnivorous, super neurotic marsupial mouse. It's amazing. And it's the closest living relative to this like Tasmanian tiger, or some people call it Tasmanian wolf, that's a marsupial, but it looks like a giant wolf. And so, but there's still 70 million years of genetic divergence. So now we're having to edit fat-tailed Dunart cells with that of what we found from the actual work that we've done with, woolly mice are on. This is not a live feed.
Okay, no. Okay, we're watching woolly mice on these screens. But yeah, there you are. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, they're on the side screens. Right. So the idea that there was not enough genetic completion to create the skull necessary?
Oh yeah. So this is good. Yeah. So we took a bunch of different samples from museums, everything from pelts.
From museums.
Yeah, from museums.
So you're kind of like Indiana Jones. You're going to these different places in the world.
If we could just stick to the lab and we could just like plug into the GCP of species, our lives would be awesome. But we have to go down, like we're at the Smithsonian, we're like going down to the catacombs of the Smithsonian. They're like picking up stuff and they're like, oh, a giant sloth, do you want this? And we're like, yes.
And I'm always sending you every link I can find. Like there's a tomb in Egypt and they think that there are alien animals mummified, and I'm like, we gotta get them.
You're like, have you seen this shit that's going on in Peru? And I was like, yes. And so,
there are privatized collections that have.
I know. I've actually seen some really weird stuff.
Yeah.
So there are people all over the world that have bought some really interesting things that people would be like, that shouldn't exist. And I'm like, can I sample it?
And then you arrive with your team and extract the DNA and bring it back to the lab.
In very rare cases, but occasionally. But yeah, and then what people don't realize is like we have to get this DNA from museums and the catacombs of museums. We also, we're both members of the Explorers Club, so we can talk about this. I sponsor you to be in the Explorers Club. We actually have to go out, and we have people like Lou Vidal and others that go out into the permafrost for like weeks on end and come back with like disgusting, rotting mammoth flesh and whatnot that we also use. So there's like, it's a combination of like that Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones kind of model.
Sure, but then when I saw the thylacine under construction, I'll say, there were three components. There was existing thylacine DNA. There was the DNA of this Dunart, the marsupial mouse, which is its closest living relative.
Yep.
And then there was a descendant of the thylacine, a wolf that shares DNA.
So what we did, if you take a thylacine skull or and a wolf skull and you put them right next to each other, you can't tell unless there's only one difference, and unless you know exactly what you're looking for. They look nearly the same, even though there's 100 million years or more of genetic divergence between wolves and in the entire canine lineage and that of the thylacine. But what's interesting is that's this process called convergent evolution, right? So it's like, this is pretty efficient, this is working. So other parts of the world are like, oh, this is working. They kind of arrive at the same thing. So how we started to think about the craniofacial morphology in thylacines was we did a lot of scans. We do have some DNA, which we've been able to extract, but then we actually built this pan-genome across all dogs and all wolves, right? So we worked with a lot of wolf experts, we worked with a lot of dog experts, and what we found is like these specific genes that led to craniofacial morphology in the skull shape and the hypercarnivorism of certain dog species, and not Bubbles, but other certain dog species.
Bubbles is my Chihuahua who's sitting in the front row, but yes, anyway. Yeah, not
a killer.
Yeah.
And then we were able to map those genes to the thylacine, and we were able to say, oh, there are genes that are similar genes that are driving convergent evolution that we wouldn't have known unless we looked at dogs and wolves.
Right. And now, those three components were put into a vial. Okay.
I wish we just put in a vial and like shook it up and like rolled the dice.
Well, but then okay, the three incomplete parts of the strand are put then into a machine.
Yeah.
That does what?
Yeah, it sounds super Frankenstein-y. It transfects it, it runs electricity through it, and separates it, and then we take that and we look at the results of that, and then we take our computers to design guides that then say, okay, how do we splice that into a version of the existing fat-tailed Dunart? And then that process rinse and repeats.
So it's almost like if someone's had a craft cocktail or like a Jello 1, 2, 3. There are these three animals and layers.
Yeah.
and then there is an electrical current run through it that combines them.
Well, it actually it separates them so that we can understand them better, and then we design our various different types of genome engineering guides that then combines them.
Which is almost like when you think of like the Big Bang.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's a little weird. You know, I have this general belief. We were doing an experiment late last year, and I'm not a scientist or a biologist, and they were like, I don't think this is going to work, and you know, I was like, well, everyone always tells us that life finds a way, and I kind of think that there's a reason for that. Like, I think that stuff wants to work, and so we tried this experiment from my perspective, which with no basis in biology, and it worked. And we actually saw like the DNA make changes and repair things that we didn't anticipate.
Okay. Well,
Or that biologists didn't anticipate. I don't know any better, so I was like, sure, it's going to work.
Well, this is an interesting, you just brought up something that made me think about what we know about the octopus.
Yeah.
Which has basically a twice as complex genetic structure
Yeah,
as human beings.
it's got about 50,000, it's got double the genes we have.
Right. And the octopus, we know, can alter its own genetic structure through its RNA.
Yeah, it can literally have its RNA in real time edit its DNA.
Do you think that...
More efficiently in many cases than a lot of our genome engineering tools.
So people are kind of fixated on the Jurassic Park element of a Colossal, but like I said, there's an iceberg below the water.
Yeah, and we should worry more about octopus.
Is part of that iceberg...
I would never eat an octopus because, yeah, that you have no idea what. I mean, maybe they're telepathic and they tell each other. We don't know anything about them. The octopus is one of the most interesting animals, I think, on the planet.
In unlocking octopus genetics, are we going to advance human genetics?
I think there's a lot of data. So we are not working on octopus, but I do think that there are because then there's gonna be like some subreddit on Kraken and all kinds of shit that I can't deal with this week. What we are learning is that there's all kinds of special, unique factors in life, and that if we eradicate this life and we don't study this life, how can it help the other parts of the planet, including us? And so, like elephants, for example, get cancer a fraction of what they should.
This is Peto's paradox.
Right. Elephants and blue whales. Elephants are easier to study for blue whales because they're mostly above land or water. And what's interesting though is that elephants, for the size and body weight in lifespan, they should get cancer on at least the same curve. And what we've seen in Peto's paradox is that they don't. They get cancer a fraction of it. And what we found is it's due to a protein called P53. And anytime you start messing with an elephant cell, which essentially is a mutation, which is essentially what leads to cancer, or if you're editing them, the cells just senesce. They just break apart, they just die. They kill themselves, and then you're like, okay. So for us to be able to even edit Asian elephant cells, we've actually had to figure out how to regulate P53 and turn it down so we can edit the cells, turn it back up, so then we don't have cancer-induced mammoths. So.
Wow.
But that's something no one really would have known unless you start studying mammoths. Those little fat-tailed Dunards. Like, so every cell, or at least cells that we work with, have this outer ring that's called the zona pellucida, and you use the laser and you shot through it. And yes, we did it with elephant cells with you because we could, if we would have put the fat-tailed Dunard cells on there, if you crank that thing to 11, it still can't, like this massive laser, you saw the power of the laser.
Sure.
It cannot pierce that. It's crazy. So we actually had to invent a type of quartz needle that also has a high degree of frequency just to break into the Dunard cells. Wow. That's how strong they are.
So,
and they can take about 100 times more edits without senescing than these other animals. Animals that are much larger, these are much larger, stronger animals, right? So. In this case, the normal-sized animals are much stronger than the animals that think they're normal size.
Interesting. Was that a dig?
It's just a factual statement of Dunart to elephant ratios.
Yes. The Dunart. I got it. Well, okay. So then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was going to ask you, about the importance of the woolly mouse, but you're kind of answering it in a way that if the woolly mouse is mixed with elephant with elephant mammoth DNA? Is the woolly mouse another great step into eradicating cancer?
Well, so what we did is mice actually have the same amount of P53 expression as we do, and so that's why, and they're fast to gestate 20 days. That's why they're really, really studied so well in laboratories. But so they don't have that same 7x expression there. So nothing that we did changed how mice express P53. It's a really good idea, though. Yeah. Value add as an investor.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. I'm earning my keep. I'm earning my keep here. Yeah, as an investor. You know, we've heard about well, maybe people haven't heard, but there was an experiment with rats and cherry blossoms, that they would negatively reinforce the scent of cherry blossoms to rats in an experiment, and then when the rats would give birth to offspring, those offspring, without having seen or smelled a cherry blossom, would be afraid of the smell. That then gets into epigenetics, the idea that DNA can be imprinted with generational trauma. That maybe this is kept in the mitochondria.
And you've been deep in this.
Yeah, this is something that's very close to me, because there's a lot of empirical data that talks about, like, for example, survivors of the Armenian genocide that I'm descended from. Yeah. The generational trauma carries out that there's a host of autoimmune conditions, Greeks, Armenians, Jewish descendants of survivors of the Holocaust. The fact that DNA, like George Church was talking about, there's a DNA storage.
100%.
That there is information that then gets stamped in and then gets passed along. Are we talking about, hopefully, the eradication of genetic disorder?
Yeah, I think that, well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I do think that we see this, like, I think people started seeing this before they started understanding epigenetics in more recent years. Even 10 years ago, I think people started saying, like, you had like those stories we've all read where it's like there was a vegan that had a heart or liver transplant, and then they're like, he or she was like, I want steak. I'm hungry for steak. And then when they've gone back and seen the person that actually was the organ donor, that they were like a giant, like, hunter, meat eater type person, right? So we've seen this. We've seen this over and over again, right? And so we know there's actually a study that came out 2 weeks ago about a third state of consciousness, where you've got life, you've got potential death, and then you've got this in-between state, and they're saying that there's, before there's cellular death, there's cellular consciousness before death. So I think that we are just starting.
There's also that theory that the mitochondria is its own organism.
Own organism, yeah. Which they're like, is that, like, is the mitochondria, and is it driving a lot of our behavior? There's, like, I think we're just starting to understand, and there's also been work to how do we hijack the mitochondria, and this is a lot of the work that many scientists in the longevity space have been trying to work on, because if we can hijack the mitochondria, it does so much to power so much of the cells, right? But it almost looks like it is older and differently evolved than the actual cells.
Wow. I want to back up here. You were talking about the success of the woolly mouse in terms of, like, from an ethical standpoint, the fact that the science, the creation of the woolly mouse was so clean. Mm-hmm. It makes me think about this technology in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
This is a privately funded company, but
with funding also from the United States government.
From the federal government, correct. And you meet with the federal government
quarterly
to talk about ethics, to talk about the rest of the world and its climate in terms of genetic manipulation. And the question is this another Manhattan Project? Is there a race to this technology so that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands?
I think that I think the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that I think that the combination of access to compute, AI, and synthetic biology, that intersection is the most powerful set of technologies, and potentially the most dangerous set of technologies the world may ever see.
Right. And it feels like there's a bit of a quickening happening now. Is that a bit of that attributed to the advancements in AI?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we use AI at every stage of our process, right? And so, and I think others are, right? We, as you mentioned, the federal government is an investor. We meet them quarterly. We meet with several different agencies, making sure that we are transparent about what we're doing, what speculatively others could be doing. Obviously, we're very focused on animals and conservation, but people could be applying some of these same technologies to humans. And the technologies are growing pretty fast, right? While I think that America leads the biotech revolution, and I do think that Colossal is at the forefront of the synthetic biology revolution, I do think that, it is a moment like, computer vision or AI, the genie's out of the bottle.
And when we talk about longevity, I know you and I had a conversation about that. Can you talk a little bit about what our understanding of the human genome and the genomes of the entire planet, like what does that mean?
Yeah,
moving forward in that capacity?
I think that in the next 20 years we will achieve longevity escape velocity, which is that point where for every year we're alive, we will add at least 1.1 years more to our life.
When do you see this happening?
I think it's in the next 20 years. I think you've got people like Ray Kurzweil and others that say it's sooner. You got people who say we're going to merge with machines. I think everyone has a different view on this. I think from sheerly a synthetic biology perspective, the tools are there. How fast we can move through regulation, FDA, and whatnot, right? You look great for your age, right? And so
thanks.
Yeah,
you're trying to make up for that Dunnar comment, but yeah.
I'm gonna have to prove that strength model behind the thing. So no, but it's like if you go look at sitcoms of the 70s and the 80s, right? It's like we're older than the people in the sitcoms.
Yeah, I think I'm the same age as Wilford Brimley and Cocoon or something. Yeah, sure.
That's scary.
No, I know.
Yeah, so it's like, and I just want to be on that same supplement stack. And so it's interesting though, is how far all these different technologies have come for health span. I think that we're now moving into lifespan, and I think that these genome engineering tools, being able to do epigenetic resets of cells, we are already reprogramming elephant cells back to their pluripotent, most nascent state, and that's significantly harder than doing that in humans.
So you're talking about mid-2040s.
Yeah, I think in the next 20 years. We will have, I think in the next 15 years we'll have a cancer vaccine.
Okay.
Not Colossal, humans.
Human beings, yeah. I want to do an exercise because I want to pick your brain.
Okay.
Okay. I want you to close your eyes.
Is this because I said that tall thing?
I'm not going to do anything weird.
Okay.
Okay, just close your eyes. No, okay.
They're legit closed.
Okay. Your eyes are closed.
I swear they're closed. Scared, but closed.
I want you to tell me what you see in our future, in our lifetime. What do you see?
From synthetic biology?
Yes.
Do you want me to do it with my eyes closed? Or do you want me to open them?
You can open them now.
Okay,
great.
I think that we will eradicate 90% of disease states. I think we'll have clean water for everyone. I think we will remove plastics from the oceans and our bodies, including blood-brain barrier. And I think that things like obesity and other pre-disease states will be completely eradicated. And I think that we will get to the point that we have true dominion over life, where we can eradicate species that are invasive, or we could bring back lost species. And I think we'll also have the ability to engineer plants, and not just for food consumption, but you will be able to engineer plants with different types of proteins. So if you want to be a vegan, you can get that same influx of protein. And I also think that there's a world where we can even, George and I like to joke about tree houses. We see a world where we can actually engineer trees growing in the shape of houses, and you can live in one with nature. And we're not even microdosing on that. We're just we really believe that we will get there.
There's a lot of people here who probably wish they had smoked something before they came in here and taken an edible. Yeah, yeah. No, okay, so
I think we'll have dominion over, I think we'll have a complete understanding and dominion over life. And I think we'll do accelerated evolution, directed evolution, and changes. I think we'll actually even invent entire new species that serve various purposes.
So the fact that our civilization has taken the industrialization scientific route.
Yep. I think it brings it back to
And
nature.
technology then brings us back to a communion with nature.
And biology, yeah.
Living in tree houses. What about?
There's going to be some thing that's like Ben Lamm and George Church want to live in a treehouse.
Well, I mean, but, okay, so
Genetically modified house that's still organically growing. It's probably better to say.
right. What about power sources, electricity?
Yeah, power source electricity. I mean, who knows what we will be able to find? You know, if we get DNA storage right, can we look at, you know, how we can use organisms for powering? You know, they're already starting to look at processors that are biocontrolled. They've started to take like neurons and brain cells and actually seeing how that can be faster. Like, what is the interface between biology and compute? Yeah.
Well, I know that. I mean, I know that there was a chimera created years ago, where they were
monkey.
They were trying to find a cure for cancer, and they found that an enzyme. A jellyfish could secrete this enzyme that could kill cancer cells. So then they entered that gene onto into a monkey, a lab monkey's
This was done in China.
chromosome, and the side effect was that because the jellyfish was such a more basic animal, that the gene for the cancer fighting enzyme also came with bioluminescence.
Yeah, I think it came with more phosphoruminescence. Yeah, it glowed, but I think
The monkey glowed.
Yeah, the monkey glowed.
Yeah.
Under the right conditions. It didn't just glow out of the gate. Like, it's not like you could see it, turn off the lights, and say, "There's a fucking glowing monkey." Like, you had to you had to shine a certain type of light, and that GFP response was glowing.
Okay.
Just to be technical.
Okay, but we're talking about an octopus altering its own genetic structure using RNA. We're talking about a monkey that has some form of phosphorescence, bioluminescence.
Yes.
Is there the potential for human beings controlling light sources?
Yes, I think yes. I think that we could build organic lighting now.
Okay. We've heard about.
Maybe replace all lights with organic lighting.
Okay, so this is kind of like Nikola Tesla's dream, I think, but in a different fork in the road.
Yeah.
But we're there.
Yeah, I think biology that's being accelerated by AI and automation and robotics will give rise to solving problems we didn't really know were problems.
We've talked before about the seed bank in Scandinavia.
Yeah. Oh, this is my favorite topic.
Okay, so you talk about longevity.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about longevity, we're talking about, I don't know, what do you think the max lifespan would be? I mean, if we're talking about, if I can make it to the mid-2040s or before, or any of us can, and we start de-aging, okay? Which brings up a whole other wild conversation about our place on Earth and what we're doing here during, you know, as a human experience.
I think there's generational loss that occurs with death. So no matter how great we get with, like, you know, the large language models and learning everything that George Church is, right? Do you lose the curiosity? Do you lose the weird factor? Do you lose some of these things of George that make George George if it could be replaced by a completely, seemingly sentient computer, right? And I think that you do, right? And so I think that...
Well, also the idea of transferring your consciousness into a machine.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm not there yet.
I'm not the one who's going to...
I always
get the off switch on that.
You know what I ask? When people say that to me, I'm always like, yes, I do think that we will get to the point that we can make an exact, you know, duplicate of you. But then you have to shoot yourself in the face.
Yeah, I'm not.
And no one that you say that to, none of them will do it. And I was like, but why? It's the same copy. It's your consciousness. Just shoot yourself.
But what we're talking about is then prolonging the lifespan and increasing you know, people's health as they live, like quality of life.
I think health span is already there and growing and continuing to increase. I think lifespan is just around the corner. I think it's already existing on some level. But I do think that, you know, if we can have people that live without, you know, an act of God, like getting hit by a car, falling off a bridge, you know, I do think that people will be able to live, you know, if you get to, you know, more than, you know, 1 year ahead of the, you know, longevity escape velocity, you are immortal.
You're immortal.
Yeah. So Brian Johnson always likes to say, and he's somewhat controversial at times, that that the phrase "living for tomorrow" is what he's all about, right? He's like, he wants to live for tomorrow, and he's like he loves his son. He absolutely loves his son. He's like, I want 200 years with my kid, and he's doing it for the right reasons. It's pretty cool.
Okay, but when you say that, I then think, are we going to outlive or outkick our resources on Earth?
I think we have to learn how. I think we're going to outkick our resources today on Earth, and so I think that there's a lot of space on the planet, right? And there's much smarter people than us working on getting us to other planets, right? And terraforming other planets. And so I do think we'll become an interstellar species. I do think that our multiplanetary, but then eventually interstellar species. So I think both are true. But I do think that lifespan and life expectancy, I think, is really important for I think it increases the speed of which innovation is happening, because you don't lose knowledge on death. So you go pick up all of George's ideas, you go pick up all of George's data, you're not George. And if George could live another 500 years, who knows what that guy could do?
Right. So doubling back to what I was saying about the seed bank in Scandinavia, which is storing pretty much an example of all of the plant life.
Yeah. We don't have that for animals, and everyone should be like rip shit pissed about it and like writing their congressperson and yelling at every NGO that they're not doing this. Like there's people like in San Diego, they've got the frozen zoo, and they've done a great job based on the resources they have, but they just take like a little tissue sample, right, and they just put it in in the freezer, right? What we need is a Manhattan scale, Manhattan project scale project that is completely global. We back up all the keystone species. We back up all the critically endangered species. We put them in biovaults. We create stem cells. We create egg cells. We have teams of people there so that when researchers want them, they can go learn about this, right? And so instead of just making weird, not glowing, pseudo glowing monkeys, they actually can cure cancer and do all this other great stuff.
We're talking about an ark.
Yeah,
we need an ark.
We need a present day ark for all life on Earth, starting with critically endangered and keystone species.
With enough biodiversity to avoid like what happened with the cheetahs. For people that don't know, that we now think that all cheetahs are descended from one cheetah. Like if they're, the flood, 11,600 years ago, there was a flood, and there was one pregnant cheetah that survived, or two cheetahs, the male and female cheetah, and that all cheetahs are descended from that cheetah.
This is very biblical / Graham Hancock, if you like it.
Shout out Grant Hancock. So what they found was there was actually a coronavirus that attacked the cheetahs. Yeah. And they were dying. As soon as they came in contact with each other, they were all dying.
And they have very low diversity still to this day.
Because they didn't have immunity because of the lack of biodiversity. That the fact that there was one strand of cheetah, we need multiple strands of every
species.
Everything on the planet.
Like they've done this with the vaquita, right? There's like 11 vaquita left. If you don't know what the vaquita is, it's the cutest porpoise you'll ever see. It looks like a baby dolphin.
Yeah, it's like a little anime porpoise.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's getting killed by Mexican drug cartels.
Right.
To kill another animal so they can feed drug habits in China. It's the most terrible story of all time. And we have like one sample of one vaquita and there's 11 left. I'm like, we need to go sample all of them. Like, why is there not a team? Like, why is there not like a Navy SEAL team that's doing long-range shots with, with non-invasive biopsy darts? And I think we may just go do it. But like, why don't we do that and back that up and create cell lines and stem cells so that if they do go extinct, we at least have that data preserved and we could bring them back. Extinction is painful, or de-extinction is very painful, it's very hard. It's gonna get better and cheaper and faster. But like, we today are losing species and we need to bank everything. We need this cradle of life, this Noah's Ark. No one's talking about it. I did talk to another country about it that seems excited about it. So
we need this bio vault.
Yeah.
And we
need it now. We need it like right now. Yeah.
But
we need to fund researchers going into the field, collecting samples, and saving species now.
And when we talk about the ethics of this, it would be unethical not to do these things.
Yeah. Making a choice to do this, some would argue is not ethical, but making a choice to do nothing results in us losing half of life on Earth. So which I think is also unethical.
Okay, we've talked about a lot, and
every conversation you and I have is like this. I don't think you got to anything on these fucking notes here. Like, I don't, this is every conversation we have.
This is every conversation we have.
We had a 5-hour dinner in LA. That was a long, I don't know if you know.
It was like multiple locations. Yeah.
We can't say why it was multiple locations.
Oh my gosh.
But you should never eat at that Italian restaurant ever again.
No, never.
Ever.
No, ever. Okay, that's another story for another time. But, you know, I'm fascinated by what you do. And there's a lot of other people, I'm sure, that are fascinated as well and have some questions. So I want to take some questions and open it up a little bit. Okay, we have some Q&A here. Okay, I'm going to say everyone. From Julian. Julian asks, very interesting and positive outlooks for the future. I found solving one problem creates new ones. What new problems do you see arriving from the fixes?
I think that we don't understand everything as it relates to ecosystem modeling, right? We can be pretty good about it. There's going to be intended, but there's going to be unintended consequences. But once again, doing nothing, we know what that looks like. And so I think that we have to just be rapidly iterating. So if we introduce a species and it's causing an unintended consequence, you know, we just need to be thoughtful about how you contain that. But I mean, she's right. I mean, I think that, you know, we have to do something. This is what we're doing. But she is right. You know, I think that there will be unintended consequences across the whole spectrum.
But just sitting on your hands and doing nothing is not a possibility.
Might as well just go, you know, 2020 again and watch Netflix.
Well, the idea that evolution is for us as a humans living in this civilization is going to be through technology.
Yeah.
Tim K asks, why not start with the present problem, like the extinction of the white rhino? Why do we need to start with the mammoth first? Or why do we need to do that?
The mammoth won't be first, but...
Mammoth isn't first.
Because there's 22-month gestation. Yeah. But, so we are working on the northern white rhino, right? And so, so two things.
So the white rhino is being worked on?
Yeah, by us.
Obviously.
No, by others, by Dr. Thomas Hillebrand, the incredible team at Biorescue, but we are the genetic rescue partner. So you talk, I don't know where Tim is, but you talked about the cheetah, right? And the rhinos have the same problem. Right, there's 2 females. They're functionally extinct no matter which they love each other or whatever. They're not going to have more. And so we have 18 embryos. We as humanity have 18 embryos. They all were from that line. Those 2 are related. And Sudan, who died a few years ago, is a male from his sperm. Well, that's the genetic diversity now of northern white rhinos. That's what's existing. So what we've done is taken our same de-extinction pipeline, and this is where the mammoth comes into the equation, and we've gone to museums, and we've gone to all these different places, frozen zoos, and we've actually been able to find and identify lost genetic diversity and build a population genomics map, like what you're saying, so that we can engineer in genetic diversity into those 18 rhinos. So we are working on the northern white rhinos. We are their exclusive genetic rescue partner on it, but the path to the mammoth built the technologies to be able to engineer in that genetic diversity.
So it's all in process, Tim K. It's all happening.
De-extinction and species preservation go hand in hand.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, Marcel Nobre wants to know, can you talk a little bit about your business model?
Yeah.
How does Colossal make money?
Yeah, so we have kind of a short-term and a long-term model. Much longer conversation, but short-term we are spinning out technology. So we spun out 2 companies publicly, which we've announced, Form Bio, which is a computational biology platform for humans, and then Breaking, which is a plastic degradation company that actually breaks the chemical bonds of plastic. So we're not making smaller microplastics, we're actually eradicating plastic, which is pretty cool.
Great.
And then we have a third one we haven't told anyone about. And we'll do more of those. That's short term. And then long term, there's actually billions of dollars to be made in annual recurring revenue from the rewilding of species and carbon sequestration, biodiversity credits, and methane suppression.
Sure. And when you talk about methane suppression, you're talking about reintegrating the mammoth to the Arctic?
Well, also the thylacine into also back into Tasmania and Lower Australia, as well as the dodo back into Mauritius. So they have different ecological. Maybe we'd have to go for another hour on it, but all those ecological intended consequences yield us to get credits that go on.
The fact that carbon gases are emitted from decomposing flora underneath the melting ice caps.
Yeah.
That the migration patterns of, say, a mammoth would help to pack the ice down and stop carbon emission and therefore slow down global warming.
And we've seen this now with 9 peer-reviewed scientific studies.
Okay. There's also potential for a science-based amusement park. You could take your kid to another park, or you could take them to go meet the animals at Colossal Park.
So everyone asks us, we get 3 questions consistently. Question number 1 is dinosaurs. Question number 2 is, why are you lying to us about dinosaurs? And then question number 3 is, well, we want to come to the park, right? And as you know, we don't bring many people to the lab. Our goal is to put animals back into the wild. We are working with governments, though, to say that once we get healthy populations, just like Africa and Kruger National Park and others, we'd love for people to go into Tasmania and see these animals back in their natural habitats, sure. Right? But I doubt there will be a for the Tasmania lovers, but I doubt there will be a something with roller coasters in the near future.
No, but the idea that but
can we put science on display? Well, like,
yes.
You've been in the lab. Lab's cool.
The lab is insane.
And that lab sucks compared to what's coming online. And so.
But I've met things.
You met and seen things.
I've met
and
things.
So we have been talking about.
And held things.
We've taught. These are all factually accurate statements. Any shit. But at the end of the day, if we can put science on display and get, kids and teachers and their families excited about science, like, how do we get people to come through our lab? We can't do that right now. That would there'd be a line out the door. But how could we replicate that where people are understanding the science and conservation, so it's not a park, but how do we put science on display? So we're working on this, and we don't have an answer yet.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, as a kid, growing up reading the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic books, I was fascinated by biology and really paid attention and became obsessed with biology class. Yeah. And here we are. If I was a kid in today's timeline, oh my God, all I'd want to do is work for Colossal.
We get a lot of requests. No one ever talks about it. We have kids and parents and teachers. They write us notes and they send us we had this last week from Florida. We had this entire classroom just draw their favorite mammoths and send them to us. We didn't ask for it. We didn't even know it. We just showed up in our lab, and the teacher wrote a note saying, "I can't get my kids to stay off their phones, even at this early stage, and I can't get them to be quiet when we take their phones away, except when we talk about Colossal."
The idea that you're promoting science and feeding it to kids and inspiring their imaginations is so important.
And we haven't even succeeded yet with this whole, I guess, the mouse, but.
Yeah, the mouse. Allison asks, have you considered the food chain in your de-extinction strategy? I mean, is that are we bringing back apex predators from other time periods? And,
no, it's a great question. And so it's actually less of we as people that work with we fund research with ecologists all around the world in different potential rewilding zones. And what's interesting about this question is we've actually found that they aren't really food chains; they're food webs. They're very, very complicated. And the food web of Tasmania and Australia is very, very bad because of the loss of the thylacine. Here's a weird turtle example. In Mauritius, they actually lost this giant turtle, went extinct, and they took a proxy for that turtle from another island from the Seychelles, brought it over, and all of a sudden, after a year, they started seeing this weird plant they've never seen. And they're like, this is an invasive species or whatever. And then people were like, no, that was a plant species that was extinct. And what happened was only the turtles were able to eat these certain seeds, and in its bile and process that it goes through before it defecates it makes the seeds germinate a certain way. Right. And so those are things that we didn't even understand about the food web, and what they've seen is just the reintroduction of these tortoises to Mauritius have had a positive effect on all of the other flora and fauna. Right. Because it's a very complicated food web. Now the good news about food webs is they readjust really well.
Well, and it's like we were saying, we live in this world of genetic modification. I think about, when you were just talking, I was thinking about Dan Barber at Blue Hill, you know, kind of the United States farm-to-table movement, and how he revolutionized how we think about farming, in that certain animals need to be brought into certain pieces of land at certain times to then optimize food production.
And nutrient density.
And nutrient density. You're talking about, on a certain level, understanding the environment and ecosystems on a level that we've never been able to understand.
Yeah, like I said, if we could just like stay in a lab and like make these things, it'd be great.
All right, well, thank you for coming out of the lab to talk to us. Kevin K says, we know that species have cultures, for example, orcas.
Oh, that's great.
How will we replicate cultural knowledge in parallel with de-extinction? And how will a baby know how to whale? We kind of talked about this a little bit when we dipped into epigenetics.
A lot of this is programmed, right? Like, you know, so it's like, this goes back to the whole life wants to work. Life knows what to work, right? We've had this conversation we had early conversations around the thylacine because we were using such a small carnivorous marsupial. Now, we're not using like an herbivore, we're using a carnivorous marsupial to make the thylacine, right? But, you know, it will just eat bigger prey, right? Because it knows how to hunt. The other thing, Kevin may find this super fascinating. You know, like the old school, like Looney Tunes, like the Wile E. Coyote, like cardboard cutout type things. So we've made those, and we've deployed them all over Tasmania and set up camera traps. And we've done them of like cats and bears and wolves and other stuff that even isn't there, and marsupials and like wombats and quolls and everything. They just walk by them, don't even notice them. But when you have the thylacine cardboard cutout with the stripes and everything, it's the shape, it's the right size. On the camera traps, they'll be walking and they will freeze and they will pause, and many of them will just start bolting. These are species that only have, you know, a couple year to 10-year lifespans. They have not seen a thylacine. That is generational knowledge that is baked into their baked into their DNA. And it's crazy. So we have a paper that will probably come. It's part of one of our ecological studies we're doing in Central Tasmania. We have a paper that'll probably come out hopefully next year around just this and showing these crazy photos and crazy videos of like aversion to thylacine, because the marsupials there, these mezzanine layer of marsupials, knows that that shape is bad, and that shape is going to kill us.
So I mean,
they haven't seen that shape in 100 years.
Well, I mean, this is blowing my mind. I mean, you know, if anyone's read, you know, The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker, you know, he was getting into studies of identical twins that were separated at birth. And raised in different environments, and he would go and was trying to understand the differences and similarities between them, and basically understand nurture versus nature. So science is actually teaching us this.
There's a lot of nature
there's a metaphysical, or is it physical, this thing that gets passed down to say this is danger. The cherry blossoms, don't go near them. Generational trauma. Like,
there's real stuff there that I think we're just starting to understand.
Why can birds know how to fly? Why do they know where to migrate?
I was with an indigenous leader in central U.S. recently. And we were talking about bison, and we were talking about wolves, and talking about a lot of things that were culturally important to him and his tribe. And he literally said, you know, there's lost knowledge when we kill these species. And I kind of wrote it off, but I kind of wrote it off a little bit. I was like, what does that mean? And then he said, when wolves are born, they know how to talk. You didn't know how to talk when you were born. And I was like, and he just said that directly too. I was like, well, that's interesting. I had thought about that. And he's like, have you ever seen a bison born? Do you think, like, you didn't know how to walk when you were born? Bisons know how to walk. And so this particular tribe has this complete reverence to nature, not just because of the living in balance of the ecosystem of his ancestors, but a massive respect to knowledge that some of these animals have. And I'm not talking about just like P53 and their genes that we could, you know, leverage for humans. It's more about like this culture believes in the specific knowledge that some of these animals have. I don't think we are, you know, I just read a thing about plants, about how like they communicate and make noises and scream when you cut them. And I was like, I just can't wait to send this to every vegan I know.
All right, nobody's having salad for lunch today. David Smith asks, what changes could be made in, this is very apropos to what we're talking about. What changes could be made in humans today with this technology to cure disease? We talked a little bit about that.
So to cure disease, we could do a lot. You know, there's people that are doing sickle cell anemia, which is a single gene mutation. We're able to knock that out, and in that, you know, cure sickle cell anemia. We aren't doing that. But most diseases are multigenic in nature, meaning that there's multiple genes all over the genomes in different pathways. You have to really understand the sub parts of it too. But being able to, that's why multiplex editing is so important. Being able to edit multiple genes at the same time with 100% efficiency, I think it's a game changer for many disease states.
Well, I mean, with the advent of artificial wombs?
Yeah, we also are, yeah, we're not there yet, but we're working on them.
But so, I mean, are humans going to replicate the old-fashioned way, or are we going to go into and program what we want our children's capacities to be?
So, great question. It's a fun play. I think we're out of time. So I can't answer the question. I think that, look, Colossal is focused on de-extinction and species preservation. I think artificial wombs to be able to grow 100 genetically diverse northern white rhinos is something that we care about. That same technology being applied to humans is something that we won't do. We will license it out and someone will run with it. But I think there'll be all kinds of ethical choices around it. Like, it is harder to grow a mammoth ex utero than a human. Not going through the FDA and clinical trials and everything. The work, that's hard. The science is easier.
But because of Colossal, we are advancing at an exponential rate. Humankind is advancing. We are ensuring that we don't lose all of the information contained within the plants
that is my biggest
and
fear.
Animals that we are potentially losing to extinction because of the work that you are doing and the lab is doing.
The team's doing, yeah.
And the team is doing. We have the opportunity now to preserve our history on this planet and
learn from it.
And learn from it.
And at a different scale.
And ensure a healthier future for us all, an unlimited future. Ben, I want to thank you today. My mind is blown. I think I speak for us all. This is...
It's fun.
I look forward to our next 5-hour dinner.
Yeah. This is just starting.
This is just getting started, everyone. We're just getting started.
The rest of my day.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.